Chain Drug Review, and Mass Market Retailers Video Forum. Brought to you by the Emerson Group.
Hello everyone, I'm Jeffrey Wolt, Editor-in-Chief of Retail Media IQ. Welcome to our video forum. Today we're thrilled to have as our guest Leslie Sarasin, President and CEO of FMI, the Food Industry Association. Welcome back, Leslie.
Thank you, Jeff. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
I was fortunate enough to hear you speak down at the FMI Midwinter Executive Conference recently, and in your remarks you talked some about a new study that FMI has done together with the Center for Food Integrity. Could you tell us what's in that study and what it might imply for the strategy of your members?
Certainly, and thank you for joining us at Midwinter. We loved having you there. And it was a pleasure to be able to talk a little bit with our members about some of the research we've been doing with CFI, we call the Center for Food Integrity. It's been an interesting study, and one of the things we've been looking at with them is how different individuals think about what is truth. And what we found in the research is that there are varying perceptions of what is truth. On the one end of the spectrum, we have a group that thinks that truth sets me free from dominance. And then on the other group says there's a truth I recognize that others don't see, and truth reinforces my dominance. And then you have people in the middle who are much more sanguine about this, I think, and view truth as being more objective and impartial than the folks on either extreme. And so the research takes a look at these different perspectives and what they mean for us as a society. And of course, from an FMI perspective, one of the things we're considered and interested in learning from this is what it means for us when we're thinking about our customers in the food industry and what those customers are thinking as they're shopping in our stores or online on our websites. And so as we think about these spectrums of truth, it has led the researchers into identifying folks into sort of one of 5 different categories. And each of those categories brings their own estimation of what constitutes truth, and therefore the things that motivate them when they're shopping or evaluating information about a product or its origins or anything else related to it. And that then in turn affects how they shop for products. And so one of the things that I really enjoyed talking with the membership about while I was there is the opportunity that this research presents in helping us to understand for the food industry how to map our audience. Who is our audience, and where do this audience of customers that we serve in communities, where do they fit on this spectrum of what constitutes truth? And then how do we use that information to develop a roadmap for engagement with those customers as we think about what they are looking for when they shop in our stores or online? And then I think of particular importance to us as a society, but also to us as an industry, is how do we move some of those folks who are on the ends of the spectrum, either end of the spectrum, more toward the middle? And so it's a little bit esoteric and challenging, but I think there's good information in this study that will help our companies better understand ways they can engage with their customers and be responsive to their needs.
Are there findings in the study that will help you as you try to advance FMI's agenda in Washington and the states?
I think so, and that's one of the reasons why this interest in trying to move people toward the middle has been so interesting to me. You are probably aware that Merriam-Webster identifies a word that they associate every year with the society every year. And the word for 2024 was polarity. That just struck me as so important because we truly live in a polarized society these days. And if we didn't believe that before, certainly the election last fall helped us realize how polarized we are as a nation. And so the objective of polarity management is to get the best, I think, from each end of the spectrum without focusing on the negatives of each, and hopefully moving some of that toward the middle where people can be more aligned in how they view the world. So I think this research we've done with CFI will help us think about ways in our own work at FMI to help bring people more toward the middle by focusing on the good things that exist at either end of the spectrum and focusing less on the things that we view as negative.
FMI, of course, has been a champion for food safety for many, many years. The Food Safety Modernization Act is being implemented currently. How is that implementation affecting your membership, both supplier and retailer? And would you like to see any changes made or modifications made as implementation continues?
I'm glad you brought this up because, as you know, I believe strenuously and say frequently that if we don't get food safety right, nothing else really matters in this industry. It's job one, period, the end. And so what's going on in the food safety realm is of critical importance to our companies and therefore to us. So we do everything we can to help our companies achieve their food safety goals and better serve the communities that they operate in. The beauty, I think, of a trade association like FMI is that it allows trading partners and even competitors to come together and talk about issues like food safety. Long before I even joined FMI, the FMI leadership had decided that food safety would not be considered a competitive issue within FMI. And we've been true to that decision ever since. So we spend a lot of time working with our companies to make sure that we create venues where they can learn from each other and share with them the latest technologies, the latest information, latest research, and that sort of thing, so that they can be as responsive as possible to the food safety needs of their customer base. This is complex, and it becomes more complex all the time. A lot of the reason it becomes more complex is because of technology, and we are so much better able now to detect things at levels that we've never been able to detect them before, and new means of detection. And so there's a lot going on in the food safety realm. One of the things in the context of the federal government has been the Food Safety Modernization Act, which FMI has supported since the days of lobbying, before it actually was passed by the Congress and then begun to be put into effect by the Food and Drug Administration. What we are dealing with now is the last of the regulations that is related to the Food Safety Modernization Act, which we lovingly call FSMA, and that is the traceability rule. It has, I think, always been known as the one that would probably be the most challenging, and so FDA left it to the end to implement. And we have a couple of issues with the final regulation. One of the issues is that the compliance date is January of 2026. That, from where I sit, feels like tomorrow. And in a lot of ways, it is going to be tomorrow when it comes to meeting the compliance requirements of the new rule. So one of the things we've been very focused on is trying to help FDA and the Congress understand that we're not against traceability. We want to be able to do everything we possibly can to enhance food safety. But the rule that, as they've put it together, is not achievable by January of 2026. And I think everyone who is involved in this and has been engaged in hearing why we think we can't make that deadline is coming to agreement. It's taking a long time, like most things in Washington do. But I think we're getting to a point where there's at least an acknowledgement that there's a challenge here with the timing. And so our hope is that we will be able to convince the new administration to actually take steps as soon as possible to delay that compliance deadline, and then to also work with us on developing some pilot projects. There are things in this rule that we don't know if they'll work or not, and frankly, FDA doesn't know if they'll work either. So our proposal has been, rather than making this the law of the land and forcing everyone to comply with something that we're not sure is going to work, why don't we do a few pilot projects? Let's test it with some companies. Let's see what we learn from that and how we might revise the system to make it more effective at the end of the day. We'll continue to work on that until we can get to a point where we think We have a compliance date that is feasible and achievable, and that we have a regulation that actually will have the desired impact, which is to enhance food safety.
And what you're suggesting is a common sense approach, and it's too bad we have to fight for common sense, but I guess we do.
I couldn't agree more.
Let me ask you about another item that's in the news, and that's high food prices. I know it's been an issue for a couple years since the period of really high inflation. Inflation's come down, but prices are still high. Two things. What do supermarket operators need to do to help the consumer understand the sources of that inflation and not take the blame, even though they don't deserve the blame?
Well, that's a tough one. And as you know, we at FMI have been working on inflation issues for years and doing a lot of different things. First of all, trying to help consumers understand what drives inflation, what it actually is and what it isn't, and help them as well as policymakers in Washington and in state capitals all over the country understand what goes into the pricing of food products. I think sometimes people don't understand the supply chain efforts that we go through to get to a product to the shelf. Fortunately, I think there's a little more understanding now than there has been in the past as a result of COVID, because there was so much discussion about food supply chains during the pandemic. But I still think there's a lot of education to be done, and so we're spending a lot of time with members of Congress, with the administration. We did it with the Biden administration, and we will be doing it with the Trump administration as well, to help them understand how the food supply chain actually functions and how little control food retailers actually have over the pricing of the products when they reach their shelf. We know that over a 40 plus year period, the profit margin for retailers has been really low. In fact, last year it was 1.6%. So there's not a lot of room there for retailers to be able to absorb a lot of costs. And so it's critical that everyone understand how the products get to the shelf, what's involved, what kinds of costs are involved, and how an increase in those costs affects the ultimate price of a food product.
Please join us next time when we bring you the second half of our conversation with Leslie.